The desert stretched endless before her, golden, burning, alive. Emily Harland had never seen land so wide that it swallowed the horizon whole. The train from St. Louis had left her in a dust-bitten town called Red Mesa, where silence hung like heat and every shadow felt like it watched. She was 19, carrying a small leather satchel, her mother's locket, and a heart too tender for the frontier. Her father had arranged her travel west to work as a schoolteacher for the rancher families near the Navajo lands. She'd thought herself brave when she left Missouri, but now standing before the emptiness of the New Mexico desert, she felt like a candle set against a storm. The wind hissed through the sagebrush, whispering things she could almost understand. Stories, warnings, maybe prayers. She started the long walk toward the ranch where a wagon was supposed to meet her, but the sun was cruel. Hours passed, and by the time the crimson rocks turned purple with evening, she realized she was lost. Her throat burned, her dress clung to her skin, and when her knees gave out, the desert spun like a dream. She thought she saw a figure, tall, dark against the dying sun, hair black as the sky behind him. Then everything faded. When Emily opened her eyes again, she lay beneath a woven blanket smelling of smoke and pine. The walls around her were made of wood and clay, decorated with hand-painted patterns, spirals, suns, and feathers. A fire glowed low in a stone pit. Her head throbbed, her lips cracked, but she wasn't afraid. She felt watched over. Then a shadow moved beside her. The man from the sunset was real. He sat cross-legged, his gaze calm, his skin bronzed from the desert sun. His hair fell in two braids that brushed his chest, and his eyes, dark, steady, held the kind of silence that came from surviving storms. "You wandered far from the road," he said in English, touched by accent, smooth and deep. "Water," he added, handing her a carved cup. She drank greedily, then whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once. "I am Kian. My mother found you. You were sleeping under the breath of the spirits." His tone was neither gentle nor cold, but something in between, like the desert itself. Emily sat up slowly. "I'm sorry to be trouble," she murmured, brushing her tangled hair from her face. He studied her quietly, as though measuring the truth of her words. Then he said, "The desert does not forgive carelessness, but it forgave you." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to make her heart stutter. "You will stay until you are strong." His voice carried the weight of command, but behind it was something unspoken. Concern, perhaps curiosity. Outside she could hear women talking softly, children laughing, the rhythm of drums far away. It was a Navajo village, and she, an outsider, had fallen into their hands like a leaf on the wind. Yet she felt no fear, only the strange peace that came from being seen after a long time unseen. That night she couldn't sleep. The fire cast soft light across the room, and every time the wind brushed through the wooden door, it carried the scent of cedar and smoke. Emily turned and saw Kian sitting outside beneath the stars. The moon painted silver on his shoulders, and the muscles beneath his shirt moved like carved stone. Something about him drew her, his stillness, his strength, the way he seemed part of the night. Without thinking, she rose, wrapping the blanket around herself, and stepped to the doorway. "You don't sleep?" she asked softly. He looked at her, eyes reflecting the firelight. "The desert does not sleep," he said simply. She smiled faintly. "Then I suppose I'll never rest again." He tilted his head, watching her. "You are afraid of this place?" "No," she whispered. "I think I'm afraid of myself." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "The desert changes people. It burns away what is weak." His gaze drifted over her face, and for the first time he smiled fully, slow, knowing, like dawn breaking after a long night. Emily felt her heart ache at the sight. "You saved me," she said. He shook his head slightly. "The desert let me find you." She stepped closer, the firelight catching in her hair. "Why?" she asked, not knowing why she needed to. Kian's eyes softened. "Because sometimes the wind brings what we need, even if we do not ask." His words sank into her like warm rain into dry earth. She didn't know if it was the desert air or the way he spoke, but something shifted inside her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel lost. She felt placed, like her feet had finally found the ground they were meant to walk. The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning neither could name. Then she whispered almost to herself, "You could have left me." Kian's eyes found hers again, deep and calm. A man does not leave what the spirits put before him. He turned his gaze to the stars. Sleep now, Emily Harland. Tomorrow the sun will test you again. She wanted to ask how he knew her name, but before she could, the wind passed through the doorway, lifting her hair like a whisper. "Good night," she said softly. He didn't answer, only gave that quiet, patient smile, the one that would one day undo her. Morning came with a sun so fierce it felt alive. When Emily stepped outside the small clay dwelling, she was greeted by the colors of a world she had never known. Red sand glowing beneath the rising light, wild horses running in the distance, and smoke curling from cooking fires that filled the air with the scent of maize and herbs. The Navajo women watched her curiously at first. Some smiled shyly, others kept their eyes down. Children followed her steps, whispering and giggling, their laughter like bells carried by wind. Kian stood a little apart, feeding his horse, his hands steady as he brushed the animal's dark mane. The sight of him, bare forearms strong and tanned, hair shining like raven feathers, stirred something in her chest she couldn't name. He looked like part of the land, carved from it, belonging in a way she never could. Yet when his eyes met hers, she felt warmth instead of distance. "You walk better today," he said simply, voice low as thunder rolling over far hills. She smiled faintly. "Thanks to you." He shrugged, but a ghost of amusement touched his lips. "Thanks to the spirits." The days that followed moved like waves, soft, strange, full of learning. Emily helped grind corn with the elder women, learned to shape clay pots, and even tried to catch water from the sparse morning rain as they did, laughing when she failed. At first she stumbled through their ways, but the women were patient, and slowly, the awkward foreign girl from Missouri became part of their rhythm. At dusk she would walk by the river and find Kian there almost always, sitting with his bow across his knees, watching the horizon as if waiting for something unseen. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes not, but even in silence he made her feel heard. Once, as the sky turned gold, she asked him, "Why do you sit here every evening?" He looked out across the land and said, "This is where my father's spirit walks. When the sun goes down, I listen." His tone carried no sorrow, only respect. Emily's heart softened. "Do you hear him?" she whispered. He turned then, his gaze catching the fading light. "Every time the wind moves," she smiled. "Then maybe it speaks to me too, because it never leaves me alone." Kian's lips curved into that slow, teasing smile. "It's because you talk too much." Even the wind must answer. That night there was a gathering by the fire. Drums beat like the heart of the earth, deep and steady. Men and women danced, their shadows long and wild under the stars. Emily sat near the flames, eyes wide, feeling both out of place and strangely home. Kian was among the dancers, his movements graceful yet powerful. Every step telling a story she could almost understand without words. When he looked her way, her breath caught. There was pride in his eyes, but also something gentler, something that made her chest ache. After the songs ended, he brought her a piece of bread cooked in the fire. "You watch but do not dance," he said. She laughed softly. "I'd look foolish." "Then dance foolishly," he said, sitting beside her. "No one is born knowing the steps." She looked at the fire, at his hands, strong, scarred, resting loosely on his knees. "You make it sound easy." "It is easy when the heart leads," he said, his gaze never leaving her face. "The heart is the first drum." For a moment neither moved. The music faded, replaced by the whisper of night. The firelight flickered across his chest, and Emily's eyes lingered there without meaning to. She could see the faint pattern of a tattoo, a spiral sun inked near his heart, lines ancient and beautiful. He noticed her glance, and his lips curved in quiet amusement. "It means life," he said, tapping the mark. "The sun gives it, the heart keeps it." Without thinking, she reached out. Her fingers brushed the edge of his chest where warmth met heartbeat. The touch was barely a breath, but Kian went still as stone. Their eyes met, his dark, hers wide, and the air between them seemed to hum. Then softly he murmured, "Careful, Darlin." His accent slipped, gentler now, touched by something intimate, something not taught by tribe or tongue. "That's where you live now." The words sank into her like heat. She froze, her hand still against his skin, heart trembling in her ribs. Then she pulled away, blushing deeply. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said quietly. "Only remember what you touched." His voice carried a smile and something heavier, something that made her wish the night would never end. After that, she couldn't look at him the same. Every time their paths crossed, at the river, the fire, or when he helped her gather wood, she felt that heartbeat again, echoing through her fingers. And Cian, though he spoke little, began to linger near her more often. He taught her words in his language. She a Emily, I am Emily. Oh, yate, yes, it is good. Each sound felt like a bridge between two worlds. One evening, when she struggled to pronounce a word, he leaned close, his breath warm against her ear as he repeated it slowly. Like this, he murmured. She tried again, her voice trembling. His laughter was soft, low, like the roll of distant thunder. Better, he said. Their eyes met again, and time stopped in the space between. The desert wind rose around them, swirling their hair, carrying the scent of smoke and rain. And Emily thought, this is what it means to belong to one place, one heart. When she lay in her bed that night, the stars blazing through the small window, she pressed her palm over her heart and felt the rhythm she had found in him. The desert outside whispered stories she didn't yet understand, but she knew one thing. Something sacred had begun. Something that neither distance nor difference could undo. And though she didn't dare name it yet, she could feel it. Alive, wild, patient as the desert itself. Days melted into weeks, and Emily began to forget the world she had come from. The land itself seemed to breathe with her now. The soft hush of morning wind, the low hum of cicadas in the heat, the call of hawks circling the mesas. She had learned to braid her hair like the women did, to wear the soft woven skirts that brushed against her ankles when she walked, to greet the dawn with quiet reverence instead of hurried steps. Sometimes she would catch her reflection in the still water of the river and barely recognize the girl staring back. She wasn't the trembling stranger who had stumbled through the desert anymore. There was something new in her eyes, peace and a hint of fire. Cian noticed it too. One afternoon when she was grinding corn beside the elder women, he passed by, leading his horse to the water. Their eyes met, and for the first time he didn't look away. His gaze lingered, steady, proud. It made her heart stumble like the rhythm of a skipped drumbeat. When he disappeared behind the bend of the river, she realized she had forgotten to breathe. That evening, as the sun bled orange and gold across the desert, Emily walked to the ridge where Cian often sat. The air was cool, scented with sage and rain that had yet to fall. She found him there, as always, quiet, a part of the horizon itself. You always sit here, she said softly. He turned his head and the faintest smile curved his lips. And you always come here to ask why. She smiled back, sitting beside him. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of everything unspoken, the gratitude she felt, the admiration she tried to hide, and the quiet wonder that came with being near someone whose soul felt ancient as the earth. Finally, she said, "Do you ever miss it, the world beyond this?" He shook his head slowly. "There is no world beyond what we can touch. There is only this sky, wind, blood, heart." He paused, his voice gentler, "And sometimes another heart that listens." She looked at him then, really looked, and felt something inside her shift. "Then I must be lucky," she whispered, "because I think I found mine here." Cian's eyes softened. The wind moved between them, lifting her hair across her face. He reached out, almost without thought, and brushed the strand away, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The touch was feather-light, reverent. Emily froze, her breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between his fingertips and her skin. He didn't move closer, didn't speak, only looked at her with the quiet intensity of a man who knew the desert's silence better than words. And somehow that silence spoke more than anything could. "Your heart," he said finally, voice rough with something he rarely allowed to show, "beats like thunder when you're near." She blushed, her throat tight. "Maybe it's the desert again," she managed. His lips curved slightly. "No, it's something stronger than the desert." That night the sky opened with rain, a rare and holy thing. The village celebrated, children dancing barefoot as droplets struck the dust and turned it to mud. Emily laughed with them, spinning until her hair clung to her shoulders and her skirts darkened with water. She turned and saw Cian watching her from the edge of the firelight, arms folded, the rain glistening on his skin. There was something in his gaze, fierce, protective, tender all at once, that made her heart tremble. Without thinking, she ran to him, rain splashing at her ankles. "You're not dancing," she said breathlessly. "I don't dance in storms," he replied, his voice low. Then stand with me in it, she challenged, her eyes bright. For a moment he simply looked at her, this foreign girl with wild laughter and eyes full of courage, and then without a word he stepped closer. The rain fell harder, soaking them both, and when his hand found hers, the world seemed to pause. She didn't know who moved first, only that suddenly his palm was at the small of her back, drawing her close, his other hand cupping her face. The warmth of his skin burned even through the chill of the rain. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling, and in that fragile space everything else disappeared. The language, the years, the boundaries of tribe and blood. Only the heartbeat remained, steady and sure, echoing between them. Emily, he whispered, her name like prayer. You shouldn't be here. Then where should I be? She asked softly. His thumb brushed her lip, his voice barely a breath. Maybe right here. He didn't kiss her then, not yet. But the promise in his eyes was enough to make her tremble. They stood like that for what felt like forever, the storm washing over them, until finally he said, "Go inside, before you catch the desert's anger." She smiled through her tears. "And you?" "I am the desert," he said simply. "It doesn't touch me." That night Emily couldn't sleep again. She lay awake, the sound of rain tapping the roof like a heartbeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the way he had looked at her, the way his voice had softened when he spoke her name. She pressed her hand over her heart and whispered to herself, "Careful, Darlin, that's where you live now." The words felt like his, though he hadn't spoken them again. It frightened her, how deeply he was already inside her, how a man she'd known for mere weeks had become the center of her quiet world. Yet it also made her feel alive, more than she ever had before. For the first time, love didn't seem like something fragile or forbidden. It felt like something born of the earth itself, wild, inevitable, and eternal. In the morning, she found him by the corral, mending the saddle straps. When he saw her, he paused. Neither spoke for a while. Then she said quietly but firmly, "You said I shouldn't be there last night." He nodded. "Because the more you stand in the storm, the harder it is to leave." "Maybe I don't want to leave," she said, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "You don't know what that means, Emily." "Then teach me," she whispered. For a moment the world held its breath. Then Kian exhaled slowly, his expression torn between restraint and something fierce, unstoppable. "The desert doesn't teach gently," he said. "Neither do hearts." And though neither of them moved, both knew something had already begun, a fire that would not go out. The evening sky blazed with the colors of an old song, amber fading into rose, rose melting into violet. The desert breathed cool and alive after the rain, and the scent of wet earth clung to the air like memory. Emily sat by the fire outside her small hut, her hands folded in her lap, her thoughts far from the dancing flames. She could feel Kian's presence even before she saw him. It was like the wind changed when he came near, softer but full of power. When she looked up, he was there, walking from the shadows with that same calm strength she had come to know so well. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said quietly, his voice carrying that low, melodic rhythm that always seemed to find her heartbeat. "I'm not alone," she whispered, eyes lifting to his. "You're here." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire cracked softly, the wind brushed against their faces, and the night wrapped around them like a secret kept by the stars. He sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his warmth against the cool of the air. "You've learned our ways faster than any outsider I've seen," he said. "Even the old women smile when you walk by." Emily laughed softly. "Maybe they laugh because I still spill the corn sometimes." "They laugh because you don't give up," he corrected, his gaze steady. "That is rare." She looked down, brushing dust from her skirt. "I wasn't always brave," she murmured. "Back home, I used to think courage meant not crying, but here, I think it means staying when you could run." Kian's hand shifted slightly on his knee, his eyes still fixed on her face. "And yet you stayed." "Because of you," she said before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air like the soft glow of the fire, unguarded, true. Kian turned toward her, the faintest surprise in his eyes followed by something deeper, something she couldn't name but felt in her bones. "Emily," he said softly, as though her name itself were sacred. She swallowed hard, her fingers trembling slightly. "You told me once that the desert changes people," she whispered. "Maybe that's true. But what if it also finds what's been waiting all along? His eyes darkened and he reached out, brushing the back of his fingers against her cheek. The touch was so gentle it ached. "You speak with your heart," he murmured. "Not many do." "Maybe because they're afraid," she replied. "Of being seen, of feeling too much." His hand lingered, then fell away slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "And you?" he asked. "Are you afraid?" She hesitated. Then, in the quietest voice, she said, "Only when you look at me like that." He smiled then, a real one this time, soft and human, breaking through the quiet power that always surrounded him. "Then I will look away," he said, though he didn't. She felt her breath catch. The firelight painted his features in gold, tracing every line of his jaw, every shadow of his lashes. The world around them fell away until there was nothing left but the steady rhythm of their hearts and the whisper of wind through the grass. Emily reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and took his hand. His skin was rough from work, warm from the fire. He didn't pull away. Instead, his thumb brushed over her knuckles in slow, deliberate circles. "You're trembling," he said softly. "Maybe the desert wind found me," she whispered. "Or maybe it's something else." He turned her hand over in his, studying it as though reading her story in the lines of her palm. "The spirits brought you here for a reason," he said quietly. "Maybe I was the reason," she whispered back. His eyes lifted to hers, full of something unguarded, something that burned quiet and steady like the heart of a flame. For a long while, they just sat there, two souls caught between worlds, speaking in silence. Then Kian rose slowly and held out his hand. "Come," he said. She hesitated. "Where?" "To see the sky," he replied. She placed her hand in his and he led her away from the fire, out past the huts to the edge of the open desert. The stars stretched endless above them, countless and bright, reflected faintly in the pools left by the storm. "In our stories," he said, his voice low and reverent, "the stars are the campfires of those who came before. When you love someone, their fire burns beside yours." Emily looked up, her eyes wide. "Then this sky must hold every heart that's ever lived." "Yes," he said, "and now it holds yours too." She turned to him, words tangled in her throat. "And yours?" she asked softly. "It's been waiting," he said simply. He stepped closer, so near she could feel his breath against her skin. The air between them hummed with unspoken truth. Emily's hands trembled as she reached up, fingers brushing the edge of his braid. "You once told me to be careful," she whispered, voice breaking slightly, "because that's where I live now." His hand rose, cupping her face with tenderness that felt like forever. "And you remembered," he murmured. "I never forgot." For a moment, time stopped. The desert wind sighed through the sagebrush. The stars flickered like candlelight, and Kian's forehead rested against hers. "Emily," he whispered, her name almost a prayer. She closed her eyes. "Yes, you have the spirit of the storm," he said, "and the heart of the fire." Her breath shivered against his. "Then maybe you were meant to find me in the rain." He smiled, a rare, quiet smile full of peace and wonder. "Maybe I was," he said, and then in that vast, endless silence, their foreheads touched again, their hands entwined, and the desert seemed to breathe around them, a witness to something pure, ancient, and alive. No promises were spoken. None were needed. In that moment under the stars that burned like old souls, Emily and Kian understood that love was not something to be claimed. It was something that found you, something that lived quietly inside, like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. The years that followed moved gently, like a slow river winding through the red heart of the desert. Seasons came and went. The rains returned and vanished again, the wind carried stories, and the earth kept its quiet rhythm. Emily stayed. She never returned east, never saw the railroads or cities that once filled her dreams. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had turned to dust, replaced by the scent of cedar smoke and the sound of laughter echoing through the canyons. The woman who had arrived frightened and pale had become part of the land itself, her skin kissed by sun, her spirit woven into the songs of the people she had learned to love. The village came to know her not as a stranger, but as the one the wind brought. Children followed her when she taught them letters in the dirt, and old women smiled when she sang softly in both tongues. And always, by her side was Kian, steady as the mountains, quiet as dawn, his eyes carrying that same unspoken warmth that had first drawn her to him beneath the storm. They built their home near the edge of the mesa, where the world opened wide in every direction. It wasn't grand, just wood and stone and the steady comfort of a fire that never went out. But it was theirs. Every morning, Emily would wake to the soft weight of sunlight through the woven roof and the sound of Kian's footsteps outside. He always rose before her, greeting the day with prayer to the four directions. Sometimes she would watch from the doorway, her heart swelling with a love that no longer frightened her. His hair had grown longer, silver threads glinted among the black. Time had softened his edges, but never his spirit. When he turned to her, his smile still made her heart flutter like it did the first time. "You're staring again," he would tease in that low, easy voice. "Only because the desert's still, showing off," she'd reply, and he'd laugh, a sound that never lost its warmth. They planted a small garden together, stubbornly coaxing green from the stubborn soil. Emily tended herbs. Kian cared for the horses. In the evenings, they would sit outside as the sun melted behind the cliffs, their hands joined in the quiet way of those who no longer need words to fill the spaces between. Sometimes when the wind shifted, it carried faint music from the village, a drum, a child's laughter, and Emily would lean against Kian's shoulder and whisper, "Do you remember the night of the rain?" He would smile, eyes half closed. "How could I forget? That was when the desert stopped being lonely." "And when you told me to be careful," she said softly, "because that's where I live now." He'd glance down at her then, that same teasing glint still hiding behind gentleness. "You still do, Darlin," he'd murmur, pressing her hand to his chest over the steady beat that had once saved her. As the years deepened, their love didn't fade, it simply changed shape. It became quieter, deeper, rooted like the old juniper tree that grew near their home. Sometimes travelers passed through and told stories of wars, of cities rising and falling, of the world spinning faster than before. But none of that touched them. Their life was simple and sacred, built of small moments. The smell of bread, baking in the morning, the rustle of wind through the canyon grass, the feeling of Kian's arm around her shoulders as they watched the stars. Once, a young Navajo girl asked Emily if she ever missed her first home. Emily smiled and said, "Home isn't a place, child. It's a heartbeat you find in someone else." And when the girl giggled and ran off, Emily turned to see Kian watching her from the doorway, pride shining in his eyes. One evening, long after the sun had slipped behind the mesas, Emily sat by the fire and listened to Kian hum an old song his father had taught him. The flames cast soft gold across his face, and for a moment she saw every version of him at once. The fierce warrior, the quiet guardian, the man who had saved her from the desert and the one who had spent a lifetime loving her. She reached out, tracing the tattoo near his heart, the same spiral sun that had once drawn her touch. "Still the same," she whispered. He took her hand, pressed it to his chest. "Still the same," he echoed. "That's where you live now." She smiled, tears blurring her eyes. "And you?" she said softly. "That's where I belong." Outside, the desert wind rose again, carrying its endless whisper across the plains. Emily closed her eyes, leaning against him as the fire crackled low. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbled, the soft kind that promised rain. She remembered the first night she had heard it when everything had begun. Now, all these years later, the sound no longer frightened her. It felt like a song, an old, familiar promise that love, once found, never truly fades. As the first drops began to fall, Kian's arm tightened around her, drawing her close. "The rain is coming," he murmured. "Let it," she said, smiling. "It brought me to you once." He kissed her forehead, slow and sure. "And it'll keep bringing you back," he whispered. The fire dimmed, the rain fell steady, and above them the stars burned bright. Those same eternal campfires of the spirits Kian once spoke of. Two hearts, two flames, side by side beneath the endless sky. And if the wind passed through the mesa, that night carrying a quiet voice, it might have sounded like a whisper of love, soft as breath, eternal as the desert. "Careful, Darlin. That's where you live now.